The views and opinions expressed in the following program are those of the hosts and guests, and not necessarily those of the staff or management of Worldwide Digital Broadcasting Corporation.
Rise! Get yourselves together! Rise! Stand up and live your life! Rise! Get yourselves together! Rise! Hands up high!
Welcome to the Rise Above show. I am Joe Peroni.
I'm Heidi Mancini.
Do we have any announcements today?
We want to thank Jay Young from City Athletic Club for sponsoring the Rise Above show with Joe and Heidi. You can reach us at josephperoni.com. That's a website that we have that our shows are archived in. Also, formerly from grieftorelief.com is another website that you can find us at. And we are live at www.dbtv.com right now in Las Vegas. So you can also find our shows archived there on that site. And on YouTube, we have our shows listed on YouTube, and there's a subscribe area on there that you can subscribe to our shows. So we would appreciate it if you're listening to our shows and you're an avid listener, if you would go there and take a minute to subscribe to us so that you can get our new and upcoming shows that we have on every week.
I just learned about that this week. I didn't even know we needed subscribers.
Yes. And we're also on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn. I announce our shows there also. We have spots available for sponsorship still. We're looking for some people to help us sponsor our show, and so we can stay on the air. We can offer some great people that come on and products that we showcase every week, and we can help you also advertise for your business, your product, with all the social media links that we're also on.
Perfect. Ready to start the show? Mm-hmm. All right, so for the second week in a row, we have someone on the phone, so I'm hoping that she's there. And we're very glad to have her. She is the founder of the Elk Institute for Psychological Health and Performance. So please welcome Dr. Carrie Elk.
Hello.
Hello.
How are you? I can hear you. All right.
Great.
So,
Great. How are you today?
Great. So what city are you calling from today?
Right now I am in West Hampton, New York, actually.
All right. So your institute is in Florida.
Well, I'm based in Florida. We're based in Florida. However, I work nationwide. So I'm in a different city almost every week, and then return to Tampa, Florida, to home base when I'm done on my rounds out here.
So is it true that the institute that you have in Florida, it's on Gun Avenue?
Yeah, isn't that great? It's the Elk Institute on Gun Highway.
I can't make that up.
I love it. When I was starting the nonprofit, because I don't charge service members or veterans, so I started a nonprofit. The guy said, "Hey, Dr. Elk, your last name is a hunting animal. It's kind of cool. We like it. We'll know it's you. So when you name your organization, use your name." And I said, "Great." And then a very generous business owner from HSW and Associates Properties donated space for service members and veterans to come there at the office at the Institute. And it just so happened, serendipitously, that it's on Gun Highway.
That's perfect.
Crazy.
I love that. I had to look at that like 2 or 3 times. It's on, yeah, so it's totally true. So we were looking forward to having you in here in the studio last year. We had a little bit of a thing, and this year I heard that you had a little an accident. Is that true?
Oh, yes, I did. I almost forgot about it. I moved so fast from one place to the other, but I was doing some work in Elmendorf Air Force Base in Alaska, and after I do a week-long trauma clinic, and it's each day 8 to 10 hours of helping folks with combat trauma. I'm a mental health professional that practices what I preach, so I usually leave those weeks and take 2 days for self-care and do something recreational and fun to rejuvenate and make sure I'm healthy. So I thought going to Park City to ski for a couple of days was a good idea. But on my third run, unfortunately, I had a little mishap. I got a little enthusiastic with my speed, I think, and I ended up tearing my ACL completely off of my knee. So I'm in a brace. It's not very fun for an active lady, but nonetheless, it could have been worse.
So you earned your trauma there.
Well, at least I was doing something fun. You know, it's not like I
Exactly.
tripped up the steps or
Well,
the curb or
that's good.
something.
Yeah.
At least I was doing something fun.
So tell everybody exactly what your institute and what you do.
So I'm a mental health professional. I've been in the field of mental health for over 20 years now. In the past several years, I've focused on military mental health just out of the request, out of a need, and specifically honed in on treating PTSD because that's what's needed. And I heard from the service members that there were a lot of barriers to treatment. So I was speaking one day on base to the Senior Enlisted Academy at MacDill, and I, did, "Hi, I'm Dr. Elk. Here's what PTSD is. Here's how you get it. Here's how we can treat it. Let me know if you need anything, and thank you so much for having me." And when I left that day, my phone just blew up, and they were saying things like, "Why haven't they told us that? That's so simple. I have that. I didn't know that was PTSD. I've got that. Do you have to tell anyone if I come see you?" And I said, "Well, I'm a civilian in private practice. As long as there are no safety concerns, those are things that I can't keep private. But anything else, come on in and get the help you need." So I had somebody come in, and after the first session, he said, "We've accomplished more here in 2 hours than I have in 2 years trying to get this under control. How much do I owe you?" And I'll tell you, when you're sitting across from somebody in a uniform and they ask how much they owe you, that kind of just doesn't compute, and won't ever really understand the price that they've paid for us. And I said, "You don't owe me anything, just be well." And that's where it began. And what happened is, when something is effective and helpful for one person, word spreads fast. And
Right.
what I ended up with was eventually my practice was flooded with service members and veterans who needed treatment. And again, not charging them, I couldn't really sustain that. So I started a nonprofit. This way, the service members and veterans individually will never have to pay. They don't have to. I don't want them to worry about that. I just want them to be well and not have a barrier to treatment. So the Elk Institute for Psychological Health and Performance was created in January 2014. So our vets could be taken care of, and Americans that want to support their troops and support their vets in a meaningful way can donate tax-deductible donations and know that their 100% of their donation is going toward the treatment and training of our veterans and service members with PTSD.
Now, I love that you have done this with this institute and that you're helping so many people. But there's so many questions that come to mind, and one of them is where do you think the gap is of why, let's say, because our tax money is supposed to be supporting the troops, and we're supposed to have a VA that if we send these men and women to war, if they come back in some way where they need help, it seems like you're the one who's picking up the ball, so to speak. And that's the other part of it is, why as a country are we dropping the ball?
Well, I don't know all of those answers, but I do know that the VA has many programs, and they keep developing more to try to make them better and better. And the military also does a great job of, making sure that they've got programs to take care of the people that have served. But there are just different reasons. People have different reasons for not wanting to use those resources or wanting an alternative or an adjunct. So when I created the Institute, I created it to augment the good programs that exist in the VA and in the military for those folks who won't get help in those places or want something different than what's already offered.
Right.
So I feel like I'm a civilian counterpart or alternative to try to be backup for the programs that are already in place. People have different reasons for wanting to go or not go to different programs or utilize different resources. I know sometimes it takes a long time to get an appointment.
Right.
I know sometimes you have to have certain kind of coverage. Sometimes you have to have a certain diagnosis or meet certain criteria. There are all those kinds of things.
Right.
And then there are service members and veterans who won't talk to somebody, a mental health professional in uniform. Then there are some that will only talk to somebody in uniform, a mental health professional who is also served. So there are a lot of individual differences, but I think most of the people that come to see me are looking for something that's corrective and something that is efficient, and they don't have to. They can get results quickly.
Ah, right.
And
so some of the barriers that you said that the military has to face, are these some of them that you're talking about, or is there more? Like such as the way I would think about it as a therapist also is that when we look at that group, we're looking at a bunch of people that are very strong, they're very individualistic. And so I would imagine that it's very hard for that group of people to even be willing to admit that they might need some help. So would you imagine that stigma would be part of the barrier?
the stigma is huge, and really where a lot of the problem actually is not which treatment works and which one doesn't. We need to back up a little further than that,
right,
and look at what PTSD actually is. Because once you understand what PTSD actually is, how one gets psychological trauma, it becomes really logical and very easy to see what effective treatment should do, or how to correct it. So in my opinion, PTSD, the people I see are not mentally ill. The people that I see are healthy people, psychologically healthy people that have memories that are stored as sensory memory, active memories. So they're not archived, so to speak. So these memories are still, when they think of an event, when they think of their traumatic event, it's like it's happening, as opposed to a historic event, it happened.
right,
So we have to look at, what is PTSD? Well, PTSD is kind of a fragmented memory, because when you're going through a traumatic event or an emergency situation, you go into fight or flight. You go into what's called your sympathetic dominance. And information is stored differently when you're in fight or flight or emergency mode than it is when you're relaxed, like in a classroom or something like that. And it doesn't allow it to be archived as historic event. It keeps it like it's an active event. I don't know if that makes any sense.
it makes all the sense in the world.
Can I ask two questions? The
Sure.
first question I have is, does everybody that go in the military, do they have PTSD?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
You say when they go in?
The reason I'm asking it is I wanted to know, is everybody that serves in the military, will every one of those people be diagnosed with some type of PTSD due to the military?
No, absolutely not.
All right.
There could be, for example, a group of people that experience the same traumatic event. Some of them will have symptoms later, some of them won't. You know yourself, even not being in the military, there are things in your lifetime that when they happened, maybe you lost sleep, or you were sick to your stomach, or you would cry easily, or you were just kind of edgy or something like that immediately following the event, whether it be a loss or an accident or a crime or something. But then over time, weeks or months, it becomes a bad or a sad memory, but not one that when you think of it takes your breath away or gives you that physical pit in your stomach response. That's because over time it naturally archived itself or integrated itself. But then we also have those events in our life that it doesn't matter how much time has passed, and you don't have many of these, maybe one or two. No matter how much time has passed, if you try to tell that story, you'll choke up, or you'll get really anxious, or you'll get really angry about it. And when you have that raw emotion about something that happened a long time ago, that intense kind of physiological response to recalling, that usually means that memory is stored in a traumatic way, and not a complete way, not an integrated way. So when it doesn't do that itself over time, I help my clients to reprocess that information manually. So then it becomes a bad or a sad memory that they can think about when they want to, without being overwhelmed by a physical response.
Okay, the second question I had, and I think you kind of answered it, was there's a lot of talk lately about childhood PTSD, where a lot of adults now are being diagnosed with that because they're finding that a lot of the mental health issues that we are seeing now is a direct result from our childhood, upbringings, things that we were exposed to. The second part of my question is if some of these issues are from a childhood that was traumatic, would it be fair to say that if in the military strategy or whatever goes on, I don't know, I've never been in the military, my father was, my sister, my brother's a Marine, I don't know what kind of, I've never been subjected to that kind of training or the mindset war, anything like that, so I don't know what that is to go through that, but would you say that maybe something in our childhoods that we shoved down inside at some point in the military could have tripped that switch again, being in the military, to bring out something that was traumatic in our childhood?
Yes, it could, but not specific to military necessarily. An adult, who had trauma in their childhood, certainly in adulthood something could happen that could trigger that. A similar scenario, or something that's reminiscent of their trauma.
Okay.
Or, not only that, when somebody has PTSD already, so just say you have childhood trauma, witnessing violence or abuse or something, whenever you have trauma, like I told you, you go into fight or flight when you're going through that traumatic event, which causes all the smells, sights, sounds, and everything around you during that event to be stored as sensory memory. So next time you come across that smell, sight, or sound, what it's attached to is the sensory that you felt during the event. That's what triggered is. So I give the example of this. So just say the three of us were standing, Heidi, in your driveway in your neighborhood, and we're just chatting, and all of a sudden a car's going down the street, and one of our kids runs out to grab a ball in front of the car. We'll all, clench, and we'll go into fight or flight, and we'll go to run and extinguish the threat, or grab the child out of the way, out of harm's way. There could be, I don't know, some music playing in the background of the car, the smell of burning brakes. Somebody could be yelling something out loud, and there could be, maybe a Target bag laying there on the ground. Well, all of those sights, smells, and sounds are being recorded, but because you're in fight or flight, they get recorded in sensory memory. So now, fast forward, months later, you're sitting at home, and your spouse walks in, and everybody's relaxed on the weekend at home, and your spouse puts the Target bag down on the table. Hey, honey, how's it going? What do you want to do today? And all of a sudden, you're agitated, you're angry, and you're antsy, and you don't even know why. Well, that Target bag is a visual that was present during the traumatic event. So now when you see that thing, it's stored in sensory memory. It's going to bring up the sensory that you felt during the traumatic event. So given that example, if you're a person that had childhood trauma, you have smells, sights, sounds, and sensations that when you encounter them as an adult are going to kick up that visceral response or that physical response that was present during your childhood trauma. So think about that. So kids with trauma grow up and are triggered more. You're more likely to get PTSD in the future if you already have existing PTSD, because you have triggers. You have things in the environment that are going to cause you to squeeze again, cause you to clench, cause you to go into fight or flight.
Yeah, it's an interesting subject because of a lot of the studies that I've looked up, and seems to be more of a recent phenomenon. But they say that the soldiers that don't have the actual combat, they actually have more PTSD than the ones who they're actually fighting. Have you seen some of the studies on that?
I've seen some studies, but I've got to know more about what exactly was in that study, who was included, and some background before I can really, speak to that. But just in general, you have to remember something, that the military is a sample of the larger general population. So there are going to be people who come into the military with PTSD. So that's one thing we've got to look at.
That's what I was leading to, yes.
Yeah, there's that, but there's also something else that I've learned from traveling around and working with people. There are a lot of jobs in the military. For example, there was a young man who, a commander thought, while you're here visiting us, if you have an opportunity, if you could talk to that young man over there, I really think that, he could probably use your help, but I don't know if he'll come talk to you. And I said, okay. Well, we happened to run into each other over coffee, and we were starting to talk. And I said, I'm here all week if you'd like to come in and chat. Well, I have never been deployed, so I don't know that, I don't really have anything that's that bad as those people who were deployed. And I just, have some problem, I've kind of been isolating and all these things. Anyway, the bottom line is, I said, well, what is your job here? Well, I'm the funeral director, or the person that has to give the eulogies, and I don't know all the right names of the positions. Sometimes I can't keep up because I work with all branches all over the place. Mm-hmm. But I went back to his office. He had so many folded flags and memory cards and pictures and all these things, and I thought, okay, so no, you haven't been deployed, but how many families have you had to grieve with, and how many people have been lost, And there are just a lot of different jobs that people can have that you don't realize that it's not direct, but it's indirect, but it's very difficult. It can be very traumatic.
And how about
sometimes
you?
Sometimes not going, with your group, and something happens to somebody. That can be an issue.
Absolutely, yeah. How about you as a therapist, listening and seeing, listening to the stories and just being around it? How does that affect you? I mean, do you need to go through a tremendous amount of self-care yourself?
No, not from hearing the stories, because, as I said, you get PTSD when you go into your sympathetic dominance, and information gets stored in a sensory way. So when I'm hearing, combat trauma, I work with people who, have been, every single time that they're called, it's a rescue or recovery. I work with them a lot, so it's never a good thing. It's always, a bad situation that they're called into. And I listen to those stories in great detail. But the thing that I know is how to self-regulate. To prevent myself from being traumatized from the material, I make sure that I stay in a relaxed, non-anxious state. I make sure that I stay in my parasympathetic. So as I'm hearing these things, it's being stored in a narrative memory. Somebody said, how do you take all of that on all day long? Why don't you take it? How do you not take that home with you? And I said, why in the world would I take somebody's traumatic material home with me? We come together into a room. They bring it out for us to deal with, and we both walk away and leave that behind, really. Why would I take that into my life? It was bad enough for that person.
Right.
So by self-regulating, by staying in a parasympathetic state or a relaxed, non-clenching state, while you're in the midst of traumatic material, it will prevent that from being stored in a traumatic way, if that makes any sense.
Makes a lot of sense. But what you're talking about, though, is a skill that you've had to learn. Like a lot of people listening, I understand it. We all can hear it. But it definitely takes a little bit of work, though. You didn't start off that way, I wouldn't think.
No, it's very mechanical in the beginning when you learn where is this on-off switch for anxiety, and where is this on-off switch for the sympathetic, the emergency fight or flight mode versus the parasympathetic or the relaxed non-anxious mode. How do you go from one to the other? And it's all the muscle groups in the lower abdominals. It's all the muscles between your belly button and your knees, like the psoas muscle, the gluteus muscles, lower abdominals, sphincter muscles. Whenever we're in the context of threat, that's the first place to squeeze or clench or respond to threat. and that starts the shift. That's where that messages are sent from that muscle group to your brain, and then you shift over into your emergency mode. Once you shift over into your fight or flight, that's when you start taking in sensory memory. So if you know that, and you know what that feels like, and you can keep a soft body, keep a relaxed, not squeezing body, you'll stay in your parasympathetic. I've been through many situations, including providing end-of-life care for my father, other relatives, and even some other people who were in hospice and things like that. They've called me, and certainly I'm not medically trained, but like with my father, when it was time for him to pass, we were at my house, just the two of us, and I kept checking myself, and every time I would check in with myself, I'd be squeezing. So I'd unclench my body, and then I'd be able to look around and say, okay, here's what's happening with Dad. What is the next right action? What needs to happen here? What do I want to do about this? And I would make a good choice, and I would take action. And then a little while later, I'd check in with myself. I'd be clenched again. So I'd unclench so I could get into a logical, reasonable frame of mind, and I could think and, pick and choose what's the next thing. If I would squeeze and clench and stay in my emergency mode, I would be in fight or flight, which means I would either do something like panicky, call 911, or, walk away and say, I can't do this, fight or flight. But I didn't want to do that. I wanted to be calm, and I don't want to be traumatized by the experience, but I also want to make good choices.
Right.
So,
it's interesting. I hear you saying that, and, I love you giving us some great advice there, too. But as one human being listening to another, I have to just mention this for a second, though. There are things in life that it's okay to be traumatized by, such as like the death of our father or our mother. And I'm wondering, you sound very, very clinical, and I'm wondering if somewhere in there's like an emotional type of bypass, because we're trying to be very technical, and I'm wondering, did you, after this situation, did you give yourself the chance to grieve? Because it doesn't sound like, it sounds like you were trying to avoid the emotional part.
No. There was definitely emotion, but not panic or not fight or flight.
Okay.
So what happens is that it was very sad, but after my dad passed, I was able to sit across the room, take a deep breath, and just kind of take it all in and think about everything. And it's think about everything that happened in a reasonable, rational way. And then once I was finished having feelings, doing all the little things that I wanted to do for him before it was time for him to leave my house and all of that, I was able to do all of those things. And I can tell you the story now without choking up or anything, because it's a historic event, and it's stored not in a traumatic. It's not traumatic for me to recall it.
Right.
It was a beautiful. It was very, I was honored to be able to provide that kind of environment for my dad. I think when it comes time for us to die and to move on, what better than to be with people that love you in a calm, peaceful kind of environment, rather than a panicked emergency kind of one. And then I can share his story, and I can share our story without it being so painful that I can't recall it. I can recall it and not have that.
I understand. So what if you did cry now? Like, is that okay for you, or do you feel like that?
Oh, yeah.
Then you're not.
Oh gosh, yes, sure. Whenever, but I'm not. I wouldn't be crying or having an emotional, like an out of control, traumatic response to remembering helping him pass.
Right.
But when I miss my father, or there's certain memories that are just touching of when I was little and things we did together, you sure miss him, and my daughter graduated and went off to college, and he wasn't there, just those normal things of sad that Dad wasn't able to be with us. And of course you miss the people that you love because you haven't seen them in a while now. But when I recall the event of helping him passed, when he died, that is not traumatic to me. That doesn't mean I don't miss him, but it doesn't mean I'm sad.
Carrie,
so sometimes when I treat one of the veterans for PTSD, and it was just a helicopter crash and they lost their friend in it. Well, when it's traumatically stored, they can hardly even think about it. They certainly couldn't tell you the story without their heart racing and getting upset about it. Well, after I treat them, they're able to tell me that same story. They may tear up. Well, they're tearing up because they're sad and they care.
Right.
That's appropriate level of emotion. You know, it's sad. You sad things are sad, but it doesn't have to be debilitating.
True. Well, one of the things why I'm bringing this up and staying on the subject a little bit is because even in my own life, I've noticed that if I'm talking to a military veteran, it's almost like I don't have clout, no matter how much experience I have as a therapist, because I've not spent any time in the military. And what I was trying to bring out in you is the fact that as human beings, we all understand the human condition. And as loving beings, we have all experienced great trauma, and we all have lost people. And so if we handle it in an honoring way, such as you have, I do, at least in my opinion, I'm not the military guy here, but I would say you have all the clout you need to take somebody from point A to point B that's had a traumatic experience, because you have had one yourself. Did we lose her? Hopefully not.
No, I'm here.
I'm having a hard time hearing you on the show.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Should I talk
There you
louder?
are. Okay. So I'm so sorry. I've got somebody that I asked to call in because, you know, I'm so sorry that I'm interrupting what your question just was, but, you know, we're talking about treating military, and kind of what you were just saying.
Yes.
Is that as a therapist who's a civilian and you don't have clout because you've never served, how do the service members, you know, respond to that, I think is what you were getting at. Is that right?
Right, yeah, and I mentioned that, and I mentioned how that's why I was spending some time talking to you about how you handled your personal trauma. Because I really do believe as human beings, we all love people, and we all lose people, and we all have traumas. It doesn't necessarily have to be a military trauma, that I would say. So I know that I would be very confident in you being able to bring a person from a very traumatized position to a very healthy position just by what you've been through in your own life, even though you haven't necessarily served in the military.
Right, but the thing is that helping somebody with PTSD is actually, you know, shifting that information. So whether I understand their story or whether we can relate to each other, it's helpful if you can, but you don't have to be able to, because you're simply helping somebody to relax their body,
right,
and shift that information over. I know it sounds so mechanical. I do love the people that I work with, and I care very much about them, and I have a great deal of respect and appreciation for the people that I work with. They do so much selflessly for us, so that's not lacking at all. But it's not necessarily me relating to them or them relating to me being necessary for treatment. In fact, what I try to tell other civilian therapists about working with military is don't tell them that you understand, because you don't. You've never been there. We've never been there. We don't know that. And what I say to service members who say, well, how are you going to help me when I tell you about this stuff? You've never been there. You don't know what that's like. And I say, you know what? I don't know what it's like. You're right. However, I'm willing to learn what I need to know about you and what you've done in order to help you. So if you could educate me on what you feel like I need to know to be equipped to help you, I'm willing. I'm willing to be educated and to listen. And sometimes they just want to tell you about their job, and do you know what this is? And here's what we do, and here's the kind of helicopter we, do this in, and this is how it works. And then they feel like that's an introduction to me. Now, here's my trauma, whether they disclose it or not. So it's really always better to say, I'll never understand that, whatever a patient's situation is. I'll never quite understand that because I'm not you, and I've never been in those shoes. But I'm willing to learn what I need to know and what you feel like I need to know to be able to help you. And then, you go from there. So what I was saying is I've got, I thought that it would be helpful because it's great for me to talk about all this stuff, and here we are, talking about what it's like for a service member, veteran to have PTSD and go through treatment. We're talking all around it, but actually sometimes the people that I work with offer, hey, if you ever need a service member or veteran to speak out about what it's like to go through treatment, I'd be willing to do that for other people who might be out there that need help. So I've got somebody on the line with us that I have worked with and is willing to, share that for anybody who might be listening that needs help, to know how it is. It's good to hear from the person themselves.
Perfect.
So, are you there?
Hi.
Hello.
Hey.
How are you?
Hi.
Hi. How are you?
So my name is Sundance Grace. I'm doing great. My name
Nice
is
to meet you.
Sundance Scardino. I'm out here in California. Carrie recently visited my unit and provided treatment for us for a week. I had a 2-hour session with her where we processed one of my earliest traumas that I could think of, that I've had a lot of nightmares with and issues with, and we worked on it for 2 hours, and it was more helpful than the 6 or 7 months of treatment that I've been getting through the Veterans Administration, seeing the various psychiatrists and psychologists and social workers.
So tell me about the treatment that you started with that was not working for you, so we know what not to do.
Well, I can't say at first. I don't want to be the person to say this is not what you should do.
Oh,
I
well,
just know
for you
for
personally
me,
then, maybe.
It didn't work for me.
Right.
When you go to the VA, it's a long process before you even can see someone. There's a lot of different interviews you have to do. That probably took about a month. Once I finally saw someone, the first thing they wanted to do is give you pills. They want to give you medicine. In fact, I was told that in order for me to be in the program, you have to take my pills, is what the psychiatrist told me.
Wow. Well, I'm sorry you had to go through that, because
yeah.
I'm 100%
Well-
against that.
Yeah. It's not something that I wanted to do. I grew up with a parent that was reliant on pills for their treatment, and I saw all the ups and downs. And when I actually went online and read all of the contraindications and all of the side effects that these medicines are going to cause,
Right.
they were all the things that I was trying to fight with my post-traumatic stress. So I went ahead and said that I was taking all of the medicines so that I could continue treatment. And I finally did see a psychologist, and was able to actually talk to someone. And from start to finish, that was at least 3 months. And then there was the whole psychological process of going to the VA and seeing all these broken people, most of them from the Vietnam era, and trying to relate to them and tell myself that that's not me.
Right.
I finally got to talk to someone, and the first thing they want to do is they want to set you up with this program that doesn't seem to have an end to it. I mean, they basically tell you that you're going to have this for the rest of your life, and there's no way out. That's
Well,
how I
it doesn't
felt.
sound very hopeful, does it?
No, it isn't. And the thing is with me, luckily, is I'm highly functional. So, and I don't take no for an answer. So, I continue to search because something inside me told me that there was a treatment option out there that is not for the rest of my life. That there is a way out.
Right.
That I will get better. And I found Carrie Elk. And that was through the Pararescue Foundation. They set up a retreat where we were going to go backpacking for a week, and we were going to get to be with this Dr. Elk. And I went online and did a Google search and immediately found one of her YouTube videos And my wife and I watched it together and broke down in tears because here's someone telling me that there's a cure and that I don't have to live with this for the rest of my life.
So how has your family life changed?
She gained my trust out of...
Ooh, I think we lost.
I think we lost him too.
Yeah, your conversation just started going in there. We're all good, man. Thank you. Then when she was able to make it out to the team, we actually got to do the 2-hour process where we got to process a memory.
Okay.
And it was a life-changing experience, and I don't use life-changing in a light way. It's not a trivial word that I would use,
Right.
but the session that I had for her for 2 hours, it changed my life.
Sundance, I'm going to ask you something. I recently saw a therapist myself, and I know what you're saying about the not seeing any end in sight. It's just the same talk and journaling type things that we do. And I was
Yeah.
told, too, that there's a program that she uses, too, that it's something to do with the memory and how they redo the memory of how whatever
Right.
the trauma is. So I'm listening to you
Right.
right now, and I'm very hopeful for myself because after talking to her, I was really skeptical about it because you live with it and you
Yes.
think I'm going to be crazy the rest of my life, or I'm not going to be able to emote normally the rest of my
Right.
life.
Yes,
So Carrie's program,
I can relate to that.
yeah, I mean seriously, I
relate
can
to
totally
those
relate
thoughts,
to that.
yeah.
And you feel crazy, you go to therapists, and you're told, over and over the same things, and you walk out going, I'm still having these problems. There's something wrong with me, and I'm going to be like this the rest of my life. And I'm 51. I don't know how old you are.
Yeah.
And to hear you
I'm
talk
45.
about that, gives me hope that I'll be able to, work through some of my trauma also.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know what her
Definitely.
program is. I don't know what it's called or how she does it, but this therapist, it was memory, going back into the memory and rerouting everything so that the responses are not the same.
Well, so in a basic term, how it was broke down to me is you have the 3 parts of your brain.
Right.
You have your lizard brain, your puppy brain, and your human brain. Those aren't the scientific terms,
Okay.
but those are layman's terms.
Yes.
And what happens is the puppy brain is where your memory is supposed to be stored. That's where the file cabinet is. Now, when you get put into a stressful situation, like combat, like working in the fire department as a paramedic firefighter, whether you like it or not, you get put into that lizard brain, that sympathetic brain, sympathetic nervous system brain. And it's fight or flight, or it's subdue, or you freeze. And I've been trained to fight. I've been trained to work.
Yeah.
And what happens is the blood is physically shut off to the puppy brain and the human brain. And so that memory, after you're done with it, it just sits there and floats around inside your lizard brain. It has nowhere to go. And things like smell, what else? Sounds. When you're talking to someone, they could be talking about something and a flashback will occur, and you'll go right back to that trauma and start reliving it. And from what I understand with working with Carrie is she makes this memory get back into your human brain, and then it finds its way back into your puppy brain. It gets stored like it's supposed to. She has a term for it, and I just thought of it, and an integrated thought. She makes it an integrated memory, and I don't have to relive it anymore.
Awesome. Can you?
So I don't know about the 3. I just know about the 2. But there's a lot of different theories out there. How different terms, I should say, not theories. Different terms that people use.
Right.
So I
Copy
use no. That's totally fine because that's a different way of understanding it. That there's a place where it goes in, and it either goes to the integrated side where it's a human, a complete memory that can be stored away wholly in a whole way, or it goes into the other one that's sensory memory that constantly can get triggered and pulled up by a smell, sight, or sound that's reminiscent of your trauma. So it's fine, but I just know it as one or the other, but that's fine.
Mm-hmm.
The whole point is that when you're like Sunny was just saying, and like I had said earlier, whenever you're in a traumatic event and you're in fight or flight because there's danger in your environment of some sort, you go into your sympathetic dominance. All that information gets stored as basic blocks of smell, sight, sound. I think about it as like little colored wooden blocks being thrown into a toy box.
Right.
They're in there. They're kind of jumbled in there all at once, just jammed in there. You don't really have time to pay attention to what exactly each one looks like because all those smell, sights, and sounds are just flooding in there because you're in an emergency mode. And so what we do when we're in a parasympathetic state or a relaxed body state, it's more like, oh, there's that smell. That's the smell of this. Look at that sound. That sound is, the car driving by. And it's integrated in a logical, sequential memory that you can recall like a regular memory. Like when I ask you right now, what did you have for breakfast? You have to go back into this, said file cabinet that we're talking about. You have to go back and retrieve that information on purpose. You go hunting for it. You find it, you look at it, and you put it away. It's not going to keep popping up in your mind. Your breakfast is not going to wake you up in a cold sweat this morning, or in the middle of the night you're sleeping and all of a sudden, oh my gosh, that breakfast. You know what I mean? Because unless you had a trauma during your breakfast, but probably didn't. Whereas if you witnessed a horrible, you were in a out somewhere and there was an active shooter in the mall or something horribly scary like that, when you were in fight or flight, now every time you hear a loud noise, because you were in fight or flight, when you heard all of that and everybody running around or whatever the situation was, all those smell, sights, and sounds just got jammed in there as basic, primitive elements of sensory data. So now when you move forward and you see a logo of a store or you smell a certain smell that was present or a certain sound, it's going to pull that back up. It's going to trigger it because it never got filed away. It's just jammed in there. So in the therapy that we do, if we're going to go back to this jammed into the toy box kind of thing,
right,
or the integrated logical sequential thing, when Sundance came in, his memory, all those elements of his trauma were just jammed in there because it was an emergency when it went on. And it was stored that way all those years. So every time he heard that sound or saw that thing, it would kick up all that sensory that he felt. Well, now what we did is I helped him get into a relaxed state, and he recalled the memory in his mind's eye, just thought about it while he's in his parasympathetic state, so that other kind of memory, the narrative memory, could take all those blocks out one at a time. Okay, there was this up on the shelf. There was this. Oh, wow, I forgot about that. Yes, that belongs there too. And that higher order human brain, or whatever you want to call it, the parasympathetic dominant state, you're able to logically put all of those blocks into a sequential order, into a whole story, and store it away in the filing cabinet. Now you can go back and think about it when you want to go back and look for it. But when you're not looking for it, it stays in there. You don't have random fragments of information bouncing around and triggering you as you go through life. So really what it is you help somebody get in a relaxed state and remember their trauma, and it will shift over to the archived, complete memory, so you don't have these sharp edges all the time.
So part of what we're talking about here is to increase the hippocampus, which is the memory center.
We're talking about maintaining a non-anxious presence,
right,
in the context of a threat, and that's how you can prevent it as well. Like I was talking about with my father, if you're able to once you can maintain a non-anxious presence in the context of your threat,
right,
that's when you master it.
Okay.
That's when you're able to logically look at what's going on and say, okay, this is not a good situation. What would I like to do about this? When you clench and you squeeze and go into fight or flight, you relinquish your ability to think logically and pick and choose. You're simply reacting. You're going to extinguish the threat or get away from it.
So you're probably not a big fan of exposure therapy then?
I am absolutely against prolonged exposure therapy.
Perfect.
However, I want to make sure I say, if anybody has gotten help or it makes sense to some folks to go through prolonged exposure therapy, or they've found it helpful, I think that's great, because I don't want anyone who finds that helpful to think that it's a bad thing. If it helps somebody, that's a good thing. And but just given what it is, you put somebody in the context of their threat repeatedly until they can handle it. Well, a lot of the time somebody comes into the therapy session and you put them, for example, if loud noises or explosions is a trigger for them. So you come into the therapy session, and the therapist in prolonged exposure therapy protocol may play recordings of explosions to increasing degree until the person can handle it for 12 to 20 sessions of that. And
Sounds like
perhaps the
torture.
homework would be to go out to fireworks displays or something like that, or have somebody set off fireworks so the person can get used to it. Now, the only thing about that is, what happens when you're in the context of your trigger, a loud explosive noise? Well, you clench and you go into fight or flight. So now you're going to be surviving your therapy. You're going to be squeezing and fight or flight during that therapy session because you're getting triggered. Now the therapist's perfume or the smell, sights, and sounds in the office could become additional triggers, because it's information that's being recorded in sensory memory because you're in fight or flight. So there's potential for that to happen. And some people get so agitated that they quit, or some people get so agitated that now they need medication because they've been, they've been triggered.
Yeah,
So that's my personal.
I agree with
that.
you, because it sounds a little like torture. I mean, what you're doing is, as you said, you're re-traumatizing somebody. And if we follow the absurdity of it, let's say somebody gets assaulted. That means a therapist would try to make somebody feel comfortable with getting hit. Or, so it just, I just don't understand that therapy. We don't have that much time left. Are you a fan of, say, EMDR?
Yes, EMDR. The only thing is that it needs to be contained when you deal with trauma. If it's open-ended, like, okay, let's start with that thought and let's see where that takes you. I would never say that to somebody when I'm helping them process a trauma, especially service members and vets. You don't know how many traumatic events they have. You start with one, then another pops up, then another. It can be like an overwhelming wildfire. So I like to have the client, what trauma, if your symptoms from a trauma could dissipate, what event would be most helpful? If you could think of an event without being triggered anymore, whatever that is, let's just deal with that. We'll go from this point in time on your timeline to this point in time. One event, and we'll contain it so it doesn't get out of control. We're not going to throw your whole life all into one big bin. So.
Right.
But EMDR, yes. EMDR is also getting somebody into their parasympathetic state and reprocessing information, for sure.
Perfect. So we only have about 2 minutes left. Let everybody know where they can find you.
You can go to our website, which is elkinstitute.org. We're a 501c3 nonprofit organization, and we rely solely on donations and sponsorships, tax-free donations and sponsorships from folks that want to make sure that our veterans get the help that they need without any barriers. And, you can find that out on the Institute's website at elkinstitute.org, and also on Facebook. We've got a Facebook page, which is Dr. Carrie Elk, Elk Institute for Psychological Health and Performance.
Perfect. And just one more thing before we go, and hopefully you can help me on this. Just so people know, PTSD, it's a natural reaction to an unnatural environment, true?
Yes, PTSD is caused by, not mental illness, it's caused by a natural physical response that happens when you're in a threatening situation, which then causes information to be stored in a way that it can pop up later and reoccur and reoccur. But it comes from a natural response, and it can be fixed, and you do not have to live with it forever. You always have a bad or sad memory, but you do not have to manage symptoms and be triggered for the rest of your life. That's not true. The disorder can be put back in order. you can lose the disorder part.
Well, thank you. I just wanted to I wanted you to clarify that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So hopefully you can come back on the show and you can actually be here so we can make some eye contact so I can see
you are.
some expressions.
I would love to. I'm missing you guys this year at SHOT Show, but there are plenty of service members here that needed my help, and this will always take priority.
Well, Las Vegas
But
is a really nice
coming
place
to
to
the SHOT
visit.
Show, not to talking to you guys. Of course.
Well, thanks for doing the show,
Thank you.
and we'll speak to you soon.
Great. Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
All right, everybody. That was Dr. Carrie Elk from the, let me get this exactly right, the Elk Institute for Psychological Health and Performance. My name is Joe Peroni.
My name is Heidi Mancini.
Thanks for listening to the Rise Above show.